can two tiny convenience stores in Boston, operating out of what is basically a large bedroom, manage to pull in more in federal food assistance funds than an actual full-service supermarket?
That question right there is the entire reason we're doing this deep dive. It just highlights a critical vulnerability in these large federal programs when people decide to systematically exploit the rules for, well, for massive profit.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to really dissect the mechanics of a truly staggering fraud case recently unsealed by the Department of Justice. It's officially titled United States v. Bonheur et al.
And this case alleges the trafficking of nearly $7 million worth of SNP benefits in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
$7 million. That's just a massive volume of aid that's supposed to be for nutrition. And it was allegedly siphoned through this sophisticated but also deceptively simple scheme.
Yeah, and this isn't about, minor errors or some accidental mistake. We are uncovering the very specific, deceptive playbook that was allegedly used by these defendants to turn government food aid directly into millions of dollars in illegal cash.
It's a perfect example of what you mentioned.
Right. It's where the financial reality of the fraud becomes completely disconnected from the physical reality of the business itself.
Okay, so let's start with the defendants and the location. The two men charged are Antonio Bonheur, who's 74, and Saul Alisme, who is just 21.
And their operation, it allegedly ran out of a single storefront in Boston's Mattapan neighborhood.
Using two business names, Jesula Variety Store and Saul Alisme Mix Store.
Mm-hmm.
And that arrangement right there, two businesses in one tiny spot, that feels like the first element of deception we need to look at.
It is, but what's really astonishing is the comparison between the physical size and the alleged revenue.
Yeah.
We're talking about a minuscule footprint here.
Okay, so picture this for a second. The sources tell us that the Jesula Variety Store, one of the two, occupied only about 150 square feet.
Which is tiny.
It's nothing. To give you some perspective, that's the size of maybe a standard walk-in closet or just a single parking spot. The other store, Saul Alisme Mix, was about 500 square feet, but still the combined space was incredibly limited.
It was set up to look just like a simple local corner shop.
But the internal sources, the government's evidence, they show that this tiny physical footprint was reporting astronomical revenue.
These limited inventory stores were generating monthly SNP redemptions that started around $100,000 and in some months spiked as high as $500,000.
Wow. Okay, let's just stop there for a second because that number, $500,000 a month, it needs context. If we compare that to legitimate business in the same area, the fraud becomes, almost undeniable.
Precisely. We know from the source documents that a full-service, dedicated supermarket, a massive operation with, dozens of aisles, freezers, produce sections, staff in that same area typically redeems only about $82,000 in SNP benefits per month.
$82,000.
That's the baseline. That's for honest, high-volume grocery sales.
So we have two tiny convenience-style shops in a space that's maybe the size of a small storefront, and they're allegedly generating 5, maybe even 6 times the SNP revenue of a real functioning supermarket right down the street.
The math just doesn't work. It doesn't lie. This massive volume discrepancy was the the screaming indicator of fraud.
Yeah.
It shows that the system that was supposed to be monitoring these benefits was, for a time, completely ignoring the basic logistical reality of inventory and storage.
You just can't do it.
You cannot physically sell $500,000 worth of approved food items a month out of a 150-square-foot store.
The volume was mathematically impossible under any legitimate conditions. So if the size discrepancy was so obvious, a clear logistical impossibility, why did it take a multi-agency DOJ investigation to stop it? And not, routine oversight? That seems like a critical question for regulators.
Well, it really underscores that without focused data analysis and the actual physical surveillance, the volume alone can get overlooked. It gets masked by the sheer number of legitimate transactions happening nationwide. But once they started digging in, the playbook they used to generate this revenue became crystal clear.
Okay, so let's move into those mechanics then. The undercover operations detailed 2 core illegal methods that allowed them to turn that electronic SNP benefit into cold, hard cash.
The first and most straightforward method is a violation known as cash trafficking. Simply put, this means illegally converting that government-provided food money directly into cash.
So at the register.
Right at the register. The defendants were observed directly exchanging the SNP benefits, which are on an EBT card and are only meant for approved food for currency. This immediately turns public assistance into untraceable income.
And the second method was selling items that are explicitly prohibited under the SNAP program rules. The sources note that investigators saw them allegedly selling liquor in exchange for SNAP benefits.
And that's a double violation. They're not only breaking the rules of the SNAP program, which absolutely forbids alcohol purchases, but they are using funds designated for nutritional assistance to sell these, heavily regulated goods.
A method designed to maximize illicit profits quickly.
No question.
But the truly staggering, and I think you could argue the most deeply cynical element of this whole operation, it involved exploiting not just the government, but something else entirely. What was this third, more egregious violation they allegedly used?
That takes us into the realm of, humanitarian aid. The charging documents detail the alleged monetization of donated goods, specifically something called Mattapan meals.
Tell us about those. What are they?
These Mattapan meals are specialized, highly nutritious donated food products. They're manufactured by a nonprofit organization called Feed My Starving Children. And crucially, this food is paid for entirely by charitable donors. It's packed by volunteers. And it is intended specifically for food-insecure children overseas in developing countries. This product is never authorized for retail sale in the United States.
It's humanitarian aid, pure and simple.
Exactly.
And yet they allegedly got their hands on this charity-funded aid and then turned around and sold these donated packages in their stores for about $8 per package, redeemed through those fraudulent SNAP transactions.
Just think about the depth of that cynicism. They were generating illegal revenue, not just by defrauding the government, but by profiting from inventory they got through charitable channels designed to feed the poorest, most vulnerable children on the planet.
So they transformed an act of international goodwill into a cynical profit center.
Selling donated goods back to the public for government-funded benefits. It's just a whole other level.
That is genuinely shocking. So given the scheme was so audacious, a tiny store with huge revenue selling international aid, how did they even try to cover their tracks before the physical surveillance began? They had to know the data would look suspicious.
That's where the statistical anomalies come in. When regulators finally did look past the physical facade, the transaction data it screamed fraud.
Let's dive into that data. If a small convenience store is operating legitimately, you should see a pattern of small transactions, right? A soda here, some snacks there.
Right.
But the data told a completely different story, didn't it?
It told the story of a Costco, or a massive grocery store, not a little variety shop. The analysis showed that over 70% of their SNAP transactions exceeded $95.
70%.
And to put that in contrast, only about 10% of their transactions were under $40.
That $95 transaction threshold, that feels like the smoking gun. That pattern of high-value purchases is what you see when someone is buying a week's worth of groceries for a big family at a supermarket. You don't walk into a 150-square-foot shop with, minimal shelving and walk out with a $100 haul of groceries. The data clearly shows they were just processing huge fake transactions to drain the benefit cards as fast as possible.
Precisely. The transactions were designed for volume, not legitimate retail. So once they had fraudulently redeemed the benefits into usable electronic funds, they immediately hit the second major hurdle of any large-scale fraud. How do you hide where the profits came from?
And this is where we move from benefit fraud to alleged money laundering.
That's right. Because the businesses generated almost no actual lawful revenue and relied almost entirely on these illicit redemptions, the funds they received were dirty. They had to use what the sources call complex banking maneuvers to hide the source.
Okay, that term, complex banking maneuvers, it sounds very technical, but it's essential to understand how were they trying to clean the $7 million?
Think of it like running money through a financial washing machine. They had numerous secondary bank accounts, way more than a small business would ever need, where the fraudulent SNAP money was immediately transferred.
Okay.
Once it was deposited, the funds were quickly withdrawn as physical cash. Then that cash was subsequently redeposited, often in smaller, less suspicious amounts.
So they were taking one large suspicious deposit from the government, the SNAP redemption, turning it into physical cash, and then putting it back into the bank in smaller pieces to make it look like normal daily sales from the store.
Exactly. This constant cycle of cash withdrawal and redeposit was entirely designed to obfuscate the true fraudulent source of the funds. They were trying to manufacture a respectable financial history for the business, making the illicit SNAP proceeds look like legitimate revenue from, selling candy and soda.
Right.
The goal was to confuse any regulator looking at the bank statements.
So let's just recap the scale of this. We're talking about nearly $7 million trafficked through systematic deception, relying first on logistical impossibility and then financial obfuscation, all operating out of two tiny locations that should have raised red flags immediately.
This deep dive really provides a clear template for large-scale federal program fraud. It requires a pattern. You have huge volume discrepancies that ignore physical reality, followed by specific illegal transactions like cash trafficking, and it culminates in these sophisticated financial maneuvers to hide the evidence.
And the charges are incredibly serious. Food stamp fraud greater than $100 carries the potential for up to 5 years in prison and a fine of $250,000 for each defendant.
As it should be. Our mission here was to give you the context of the precise mechanics of this case. And the whole operation, it ultimately hinged on that simple, verifiable reality that a store the size of a bedroom was earning exponentially more than a full-size supermarket.
And this raises a really important question for you, the listener, especially those concerned with the integrity of these large public assistance programs. If the fundamental physical reality of a business, something easily measurable, can be so easily ignored by oversight, allowing millions of taxpayer dollars to be siphoned off, what objective metrics and real-time comparative data should regulators prioritize to truly protect public funds and make sure that assistance only goes where it's intended?
It seems like you have to integrate those logistical checks against the pure transactional data.
You absolutely have to.